More champagne? Larry's mom asked, easily filling my glass to the brim before I could answer. I couldn't help but smile, even though I was feeling insecure inside. My gaze swept across the room, lingering on my son and his fiancée, sitting opposite. This dinner was meant to be a quiet family celebration on the occasion of their engagement, but something inside me was already giving alarm signals. To Laura, I said, trying to maintain a cheerful atmosphere. Laura, purring like a contented cat, gently tapped her glass against mine. I took a long drink, trying to muffle my anxiety. At that moment, Larry exchanged a brief but significant glance with Laura and spoke. We want to talk to you about something tonight. His voice was full of confidence. We are planning to have a big engagement celebration next month. Everything should be at the highest level, only the best for us. I laughed nervously, trying to hide my sudden excitement. It sounds great, but aren't such events very expensive? Laura waved her hand with deliberate nonchalance and replied. Oh, we won't pay for this. This will be your gift to us. My glass froze in the air. I almost choked on the champagne. I'm sorry, what? I asked in disbelief. Laura, as if she hadn't noticed my confusion, continued. As Larry's mother, you have to cover all expenses. We are counting on at least $30,000. Consider it an investment in your son's future. They can't be serious, I thought. $30,000 for one party? I tried to regain my composure and asked. You understand how unreasonable this is, don't you? This is simply absurd. At that moment Larry's mom intervened. You earn well, and you still have an inheritance from your husband. You didn't spend it. Every word about my late husband, who recently died of cancer, was like a blow to a fresh wound. I felt like something was squeezing inside of me. This money is my retirement savings. They are meant for my life, not for such expenses. Why didn't anyone discuss this with me in advance? I tried to get through to common sense. Laura rolled her eyes theatrically, clearly displeased with my objections. Get over it. You're the groom's mother, that's your responsibility. Just pay up and be glad that we invited you to participate in this. Larry, sitting next to me, just grinned, showing no sympathy. Write a check, he said, so we can start planning. My hands trembled with indignation. I sat there, not believing what I was hearing. My own son, whom I had always pampered, now demanded a lot of money from me without showing the slightest respect. Larry, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, you can have a great celebration without spending so much money. Maybe we could save some money. His reaction was instant and furious. Larry slammed his fist down on the table with all his might, making the glasses shake. I knew you'd be stingy. He shouted, rage flashing in his eyes. You don't support your only son. What kind of mother are you? Tears came to my eyes. I've always been proud of being a good mother to Larry, always trying to give him the best. But now, faced with his anger and cruelty, I couldn't believe that he was capable of such words. I stood up abruptly, feeling anger and frustration overwhelm me. I think it's time for you to leave, I said in a low but firm voice. Laura jumped up from her seat, her eyes glittering with indignation. She came up to me and squeezed my shoulders with her sharp, bright red nails. Don't even think about shirking your responsibilities, she hissed, her heavy perfume breath hitting me in the face. Pay up or forget about Larry and your future grandchildren. I pushed her away forcefully. Get out of my house. I shouted, feeling a wave of anger wash over me. Larry and Laura didn't say a word. They turned around and left, but I caught a glimpse of their pleased, triumphant grins. Something smells good, Larry said, entering the kitchen and heading straight for the wine cabinet. For a moment, I felt the hope of a calm conversation, but it immediately faded when Laura followed him in, from whom the pungent smell of her perfume again emanated. She was clearly determined to continue her game. What kind of pleasure brought you to me today? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm, even though I was already having disturbing thoughts in my head. I tried to focus on the pasta I was cooking, hoping that at least a simple meal would defuse the situation. "You're going to love what we've planned," Laura said cheerfully, completely ignoring my restrained tone. She took out a package of documents from her bright purse. "We met with the wedding planner today, and everything is ready. There is only one small detail left, your signature." She pulled out a thick folder full of pamphlets and bills and pushed it at me. "Just sign here so we can get a $70,000 wedding package." My stomach turned cold. $70,000? In one day? 70,000? I exclaimed, trying to comprehend what I had heard. "This is absurd." "It's just one day." "It's our special day," Larry retorted sharply. "Don't I deserve the best?" I sighed and looked at him, trying to find some sense in his gaze. "Larry, dear, be reasonable," I began, taking a step towards him. "Let's have a small but meaningful ceremony. This will not only save money, but also make everything more intimate and real. Do you really need all this ostentatious splendor?" But before I could finish, Laura threw the folder on the table with annoyance. "You ignorant fool!" she shouted, her voice ringing with cold fury. "Who told you that you have a say in this? You will pay every penny to give your only son the wedding of his dreams." A wave of anger boiled up inside me. How could they be so heartless, so shameless? But before I could answer, there was the sound of footsteps in the room. We all turned around and saw Linda, my daughter, standing in the doorway with a determined expression on her face. I was so engrossed in the argument that I didn't notice her coming. "Stay away from this," Laura snapped, her voice full of contempt. But Linda, with her characteristic boldness, took a step forward, crossing her arms over her chest. As always, she was confident in herself, a bold tattooed writer of graphic novels, accustomed to not giving herself offense. "You don't dare talk to my mother like that," she replied coldly, her voice as hard as steel. "Mom owes you nothing but basic respect, which you are clearly unable to show." She stood next to me, as if she had built an invisible shield around me. My heart fluttered, and although I had always been proud of my independence, at that moment I was grateful for her support. Larry waved his hands as if trying to wave us all away. "I asked for one simple wedding," he exclaimed, his voice trembling with indignation, "and now my whole family is rebelling against me." He pointed a finger at Linda. "It's all you. You're filling Mom with crazy ideas. She owes me. And this money, and your loyalty." Linda didn't flinch. "Mom owes you nothing but basic respect," she said firmly. "She raised you alone after Dad died, worked tirelessly to give you everything she could. Is that how you thank her? Using it, demanding more and more?" Larry didn't say anything. He just muttered something under his breath, and for a moment there was silence in the room. Linda turned to me and gently but confidently took my hand. "Be strong, Mom," she whispered. "Set your boundaries and demand the respect you deserve. I'm here for you." Her words enveloped me with warmth, and at that moment I felt the doubts that had been tormenting me for a long time begin to melt. I straightened up, my confidence revived. "You both have two options," I said, looking directly at Larry and Laura. "Either you start treating me and Linda with basic respect, or you leave our lives forever." Laura wanted to say something. Her mouth was already open for another harsh remark, but she met Linda's gaze and fell silent. Her eyes darted from Larry to Linda for a few moments before she grabbed Larry by the ear and dragged him out of the room. When the door slammed behind them, I felt the tension in my body gradually release. Linda was still holding my hand, and tears of gratitude welled up in my eyes. "How lucky I am to have a daughter like you," I whispered. Linda just smiled. Her smile was warm and sincere. "Just a piece of the old block, Mom. Now let's eat these pasta and think about how we're going to cope. These two have no idea who they're messing with." The situation remained tense the following week. My phone rang non-stop, bursting with messages and voice recordings from Larry. I started ignoring Larry's calls, realizing that I no longer had the strength to cope with his bombastic tirades and endless claims. Every time the phone vibrated, I felt not irritation, but rather heavy fatigue from their insane demands. However, when Saturday came, I decided that I deserved at least a moment of peace and relaxation. I signed up for a manicure, hoping that this simple pleasure would cheer me up a little. In the salon, I allowed myself to relax, leaning back in an upholstered chair, while the master carefully worked on my nails. The soft light, the smell of lotions, and the soft music calmed my nerves, although deep inside the storm was still raging. I was ready to forget about the calls and get distracted, but as soon as the phone vibrated again, I couldn't resist looking at the screen. It was Larry's number. I knew I shouldn't answer, but at that moment something inside me clicked: curiosity, perhaps, or intuition, which suggested that this might be important. "Hi, honey," I said carefully, hoping that this time the conversation would be peaceful. But instead of Larry's voice, Laura's cold, harsh voice came on the line. "This is your witch from hell." Laura's words cut into me, and my blood instantly boiled at her insolence. I was about to hang up when I heard Larry's voice in the background. "This old bag finally answered your call. She's been ignoring me all week." Larry said it so casually, as if I was someone insignificant to him, something that could be pushed into the background if it did not serve his interests. I felt my anger boiling, but I decided to listen to the end anyway, hoping to understand what they were leading to. "Mom, what the hell? I'm calling you non-stop." Larry continued irritably. "Have you thought about financing the wedding yet? The coordinator is about to start arranging everything." I clenched my teeth, ready to firmly answer no, but Laura immediately interrupted me with her voice full of contempt. "Oh, forget about it. She's already lost. We will change all her account passwords immediately after the wedding so that she can no longer touch our money." My heart started beating faster. My eyes widened in shock. "Our money? They are already planning how to deprive me of control over what belongs to me, what I have been saving all my life." My body started shaking with rage, but the worst was yet to come. "Why are we even inviting her to the wedding?" Laura asked contemptuously, and I heard her chuckle. "She'll show up in some cheap clothes from a discount store. It will only be a disgrace." Their loud laughter pierced me like a knife, tearing apart all the remnants of my tolerance and compassion. But Larry's next sentence hit me even harder. "Yes, and she will complain that she helped us. As if this tiny insurance payout is somehow comparable to what I earn in a month." A tiny payout? I was shocked. This is $500,000 that I have saved for retirement, money that I have been saving for years, denying myself a lot. I knew Larry was irresponsible, but hearing him openly laugh about it like it didn't matter was the last straw. "Oh, please." Laura continued to laugh. "We both know that your dad's money gave you a job that your mom couldn't handle. She is absolutely useless without his money." The laughter continued, and I could feel the anger building inside me like a storm. My hands were shaking, and I pressed the end call button with such force that the phone screen almost cracked. What I heard confirmed my worst suspicions and at the same time deeply shocked me. I felt betrayed, used, as if I was just a source of funds for these people who once seemed like family to me. I quickly brushed off the concerned looks of the manicurist, unable to explain what I had just heard. I threw the money on the counter and almost ran out of the salon. Everything was boiling inside me, and my thoughts were confused, driving me crazy. I couldn't delay any longer. I needed to talk to someone, share what I had just learned. When I arrived home, Linda was already there. Her motorcycle, as usual, was parked unevenly by the driveway. I burst into the house, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Linda jumped up from the couch, surprised by my upset look. "Mom, what happened?" "What is it?" she asked, but when she saw my tearful eyes, she immediately understood everything. Without holding back any longer, I poured out everything, every moment, every word, every cool phrase uttered by Larry and Laura. My rage spilled out with every sentence, and by the time I finally finished, Linda was already on the verge of exploding. Her green eyes glittered with anger. "These liars." "Stop it," she screamed. I knew that they never cared about family or holidays. To them, you're just a walking ATM. I looked at her, feeling bitter and bitterly disappointed. My own son. I whispered. How could he do that? How could he stoop to this? Linda took me by the shoulders and looked me firmly in the eyes. Mom, listen. We need to get the evidence and expose them. I felt a surge of strength and confidence again. Linda was right. It's time to take control and fight back against those who so unceremoniously tried to manipulate me and my life. Hugging Linda, I felt grateful for her support, for not being afraid to stand by my side when others betrayed me. She was my light in this dark whirlpool of lies and betrayal. Let's expose them, I said decisively, feeling the fire of struggle flare up inside me. The next 4 weeks were a whirlwind of investigations and evidence gathering. Linda and I acted like a real team. She used her connections and skills, and I focused on the documents and accounts, which, as it turned out, hid much more than I could have imagined. Linda found out that Laura came from an incredibly wealthy family. Her father was the owner of a large real estate investment company, and could easily pay for this whole ridiculously luxurious wedding. Every day it became clearer that this whole story was built on deception, on the desire to use my money, and not to solve something honestly. I, in turn, received financial statements from the wedding planner, where it was indicated that Larry and Laura were trying to pass on expenses of $95,000 to me. A sum that seemed calculated to ruin me to the last penny. But now we had all the necessary evidence to put these scammers in their place. We have everything we need to expose them, Linda said, laying out papers on the dining room table. Let's invite them to discuss wedding plans and, when they are vulnerable, we will reveal all the cards. I felt something stir inside me, as if a long wait had begun for the moment when everything would fall into place. After calling Larry and Laura, I pretended that I was ready to discuss the payment for the wedding. They pecked at once, like hungry fish, expecting easy money, and agreed to come immediately. When the doorbell rang loudly, I was already ready for the meeting. Larry and Laura walked in with such arrogance, as if the whole world belonged to them. Their confident smiles and the smell of expensive perfume only increased my disgust. "Where's my check?" Larry demanded without the slightest hint of politeness. He was sure that, as before, I would succumb to his pressure and just write a check without asking questions. Laura, noticing his rudeness, gently nudged him with her elbow and pulled a fake smile on her face. "Well, tell us the good news," she happily declared, clearly playing the role of a caring daughter-in-law. "We have so many important decisions to make for our big day." I motioned for them to sit down. My gaze was cold, my hands trembled slightly from the strain, but I maintained complete composure. Linda, like a loyal colleague, quietly handed me a thick envelope full of revealing documents. I took a deep breath and began to speak, feeling how each of my phrases brings the moment of truth closer. "Before we continue the discussion, I have some concerns," I began calmly, taking the papers out of the envelope and laying them out on the table in front of me. "According to the wedding planner's reports, the running costs of the wedding are $95,000. Can you explain how it happened?" Laura laughed out loud, as if I'd asked a ridiculous question. "This is the wedding of the century. What did you expect?" Her voice was full of mockery. I exhaled and, gathering my courage, continued. "I expect honest communication about finances and equal responsibility. For example, why don't Laura's parents, having such huge fortunes, contribute their share?" I put in front of them a copy of her father's business profile, which showed that his fortune was estimated at tens of millions. It was more than enough to cover all the expenses of the wedding. Laura paused, turning pale with surprise. Larry looked annoyed. "Leave Laura's family alone," he said roughly. "This is my wedding, my finances, and you, as my mother, should just write a check." I smiled at him, but that smile expressed nothing but icy calm. As if anticipating their resistance, I turned over the next page of documents and continued. "These papers say otherwise. It contains invoices and contracts with a forged signature authorizing payments in the amount of $230,000. Can you explain it? Laura gasped, her face contorted with anger. Are you accusing us of fraud? She jumped up, almost screaming. Linda, standing nearby, slammed her fist loudly on the table. That's right. Her voice sounded menacing. You both used my mother's love and trust, thinking only of what you could get from her. Laura rolled her eyes as if in a last desperate gesture of contempt. Spineless mama's boy, she hissed bitterly, holding her bright purse as if she was ready to throw it against the wall to release her accumulated anger. Without waiting for an answer, she stormed out of the room, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and an explosion of disappointment in the air. Already in the doorway, she turned for a moment to cast a last, angry and disdainful glance over her shoulder. You're going to regret this, her voice rang like a taut string, enveloping me with cold and hidden threat. We won't forget. And with that, she disappeared, leaving a silence in which even the air seemed heavy and filled with hatred. I was looking directly at Larry, who was sitting as if overwhelmed by a wave of his own shock. It seemed that the world around him was collapsing, but still I could see that he was still holding on to his pride, to the illusions that he had created for himself. We won't forget. I repeated in a whisper, looking him straight in the eye. We won't forget either, Larry. My words, quiet but filled with steel, hung in the air. Larry finally got up. He stood up slowly, but before leaving, he cast a menacing glance over his shoulder. I'm going to make you pay for this, he said softly, but the threat in his voice was clear and weighty. The moment I had been dreading had finally arrived, the day of their lavish wedding. Despite all our differences and past confrontations, Larry and Laura did not stop in their extravagant plans. Their wedding, like everything else in their lives, became the epitome of ostentatious wealth and vanity. I knew that a significant part of the money they spent came from my retirement savings, which I once set aside for another life, for a quiet old age. But now I was sitting among the guests, reluctantly participating in their theatrical performance. There was an atmosphere of excess around me, floral arrangements that I suspected cost more than my first car, the deafening noise of guests who seemed to have forgotten all decency, and endless conversations about wealth and status. The highlight of the whole event was an 8-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers, each of which was handmade. Larry and Laura's smug faces were framed in a huge gold frame, towering over the entire pompous set like idols that everyone was told to praise. Linda sat next to him, huddled in her modest outfit, ripped jeans and army boots in stark contrast to the luxurious pastel dresses that the brides and bridesmaids were wearing. Her bright green pixie-cut hair seemed like the only real touch amid the hypocrisy. We both watched with barely concealed disgust. The music suddenly changed, and a majestic wedding march was heard. The crowd of guests quieted down, and Larry took his place under a magnificent arch decorated with flowers and light. My heart sank. He looked like his father, handsome and charming in his black tuxedo, but this external gloss could not hide what I now knew about his true nature. Laura was walking down the aisle in a gorgeous wedding dress that I suspected had been paid for with my old credit card. She was the epitome of sophistication, but in my eyes, the sight of her reminded me of all that I had lost. Memories came flooding back to me like a wave. More than 28 years ago, I myself walked down the same aisle, full of naive hopes for a happy family life. But my dreams were shattered by the harsh reality. After my husband's death, everything collapsed. Now my own son, the one we raised with love, has turned his back on me for money. The ceremony continued, but a feeling of anger and disappointment began to grow inside me. I couldn't stand this lie anymore, this farcical performance that they called a wedding. Abruptly rising from my seat, I heard the chair creak on the polished floor, attracting all eyes in my direction. Linda instantly stood next to me, her hand touching mine, giving me the strength and confidence I needed so much. I'm sorry, I began, feeling my insides churning with anger, but keeping my outwardly calm. But I can't keep quiet about this farce anymore. The whispers of the guests became louder, and quiet gossip began around me. Larry's face turned red with embarrassment, but he didn't look me in the eye. Laura, seeing my determined expression, walked past him and took a step towards me, her eyes blazing with anger. How dare you ruin my perfect day? She screamed, her hands raised in an aggressive gesture, as if she was ready to attack me right here, among all these guests. I involuntarily stepped back, but Linda stepped forward, blocking me from Laura. "Step back," she said firmly, her voice as cold as steel. The room fell into stunned silence, and no one dared to move. Larry lowered his head, avoiding my gaze, not even trying to stop his fiancée. My heart broke. At that moment, all illusions finally collapsed. My skirt swirled dramatically, as if to emphasize the finality of my departure, as I walked past Larry, who, stunned, only watched my steps. His earlier threat rang in my head, and I stopped for a moment to look him straight in the eye and repeat it, now from my side. "You're going to regret this," I said confidently and coldly, feeling my strength fill me up again. Laura could scream and threaten all she wanted, but I was no longer the kind of woman they could intimidate. I walked away confidently, Linda walking beside me, our steps synchronously reflecting the confidence with which we left this place. The heavy doors slammed shut behind us, and Laura's angry screams remained somewhere behind them, drowning in the past like the sound of a distant wind. We went outside, where the dim autumn sun softly illuminated the sidewalks. I took a deep breath, feeling the chains that I had allowed myself to be shackled in so many years ago fall off with every breath of air. "Thanks for being with me," I said, squeezing Linda's tattooed hand. Her palm was firm and warm, reminding me that there is something real and reliable in this chaotic world. Linda smiled, her smile filled with warmth and understanding. "Are you kidding?" "I've wanted to confront Laura ever since she came into our lives," she replied with a hint of humor in her voice, but I knew there was genuine concern behind it. We drove away from this theater of luxury and deception, and as the car took us further away, I felt the tension begin to subside. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to relax. Tears, long hidden under the mask of endurance, slowly came to my eyes. But they weren't tears of pain or regret, they were tears of relief. Looking at Linda, at her confident, independent figure behind the wheel, I realized that I would never be alone again. I had her, and that was enough. A few months after that disastrous wedding, I decided to sever all remaining ties with the past. I changed my phone number, moved to a new location, closed all joint accounts, transferred the remaining assets to my personal accounts. I no longer wanted to be associated with Larry or his fiancée, who turned out to be the epitome of toxicity for me. Soon, I started hearing rumors that Larry and Laura had spent their honeymoon in Australia, probably spending the last crumbs of my retirement savings. Let them spoil themselves, I thought bitterly, knowing that reality would soon overtake them. After all, even the most carefully constructed illusions eventually collapse under the weight of their own mistakes. And, as I expected, just a year after their gorgeous holiday, Larry reappeared in my life. It happened unexpectedly. I came home from work and saw him sitting on my doorstep. He looked haggard, unshaven, and there was a smell of cigarettes around him, an unpleasant, musty smell, a symbol of his downfall. I was so amazed at the grocery bag I was holding slipped to the ground. Embarrassment flashed in his eyes. He tried to help me pick up the fallen things, but I stopped him with a cold gesture. "Hey, Mom," he began softly, as if trying to speak as softly as possible. "Can we talk?" I silently unlocked the door and motioned for him to come in. He awkwardly crossed the threshold and lingered in the hallway while I slowly put the groceries on the shelves, trying to keep my cool. When it was done, I turned to him. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly, without unnecessary preliminaries, not allowing myself to show the slightest weakness. Larry cleared his throat nervously. "I need your help, only temporarily," he added hastily, as if that might soften his request. "I'm between jobs right now, and Laura is." He hesitated. "Laura is upset because I can't cover her expenses." His words hung in the air, and I felt anger flare up inside me. "You created this mess," I interrupted him in a harsh tone. "Now you deal with him yourself." Larry looked shocked. Apparently, he did not expect that I could so firmly refuse him. "Come on, Mom," he pleaded. "It's very hard for me right now. Could you lend me some money? I will return them, I promise. You already promised once, I reminded him coldly, crossing my arms over my chest. When you emptied my accounts for the first time. Why should I believe you now? Larry blushed, his face contorted with resentment and embarrassment. I was wrong before, okay? But I'm still your son. You lost that privilege a long time ago. I cut him off abruptly. I don't have a son anymore. You chose your own destiny. Now you are faced with its consequences. Go away. Larry tried to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. He slumped his shoulders and seemed to sag under the weight of his own disappointment. With his head down, he left my house again, and my life. I stood at the door and watched him leave, feeling that I had made the right choice. Meanwhile, Laura, exhausted by endless arguments about unpaid bills and unfulfilled ambitions, found solace with her rich father. Her return to her parents' house was marked by a breakup with Larry, which I only found out from rumors, because after everything that happened, there was no communication between us anymore. The latest news about her spoke of an imminent divorce and new connections with a wealthy older man from her circle. This information caused me nothing but indifference and a slight mockery of the unchanging course of her life, which always revolved around money and status. That evening, Linda and I sat at a table surrounded by soft candlelight, raising cocktail glasses. We laughed at the absurdity of fate, which led Larry to work in one of the fast food chains, and, as they said, under an assumed name. Karma, as always, acted according to its unwritten laws. Karma is harsh, Linda said, raising her glass and flashing her eyes in the candlelight. Let's drink to that, to those who deservedly get what they sowed. I happily clinked glasses with her, feeling deeply satisfied. There was a truth in her words that I could only agree with. We've been through too much not to notice how things are going back to normal. As the year went on, Linda's career was rapidly gaining momentum. More and more high-profile clients were eager to get their hands on her unique tattoos and graphic works. Her name became recognizable among artists and writers, and contracts for the publication of her memoirs, in which she described our family difficulties, caused a real stir even before the book was released on the shelves. Her honest and brave story inspired many, and I, at her request, took up the financial and legal side of her affairs. My many years of experience in the field of business relations turned out to be useful, and I used it to protect her interests, negotiate publication rights, and help her maximize profits. It was incredibly proud of Linda, watching how her hobbies and talents lead to real success, and even more pleasant to realize that I was able to contribute to this process. Linda began to appear on the pages of fashion magazines, her work was published in popular anthologies, and there were more and more famous people among her friends and acquaintances. She acquired a stylish loft in the city center, which became both her home and a workspace, a symbol of her independence and creative prosperity. In honor of her success, I decided to organize a small party at Linda's new house. It was a special event that was supposed to mark her as a true creative force and an independent businesswoman. Linda was a little nervous before the party started, and I gently adjusted her jacket to calm her down. Just be yourself, I told her with a smile. Everyone who is here has loved you for a long time. The evening was full of special magic. The loft was filled with Linda's creative friends, writers, publishers, photographers, and other famous people, each of whom was inspired by her work. Linda's influence was growing every day, and this party was proof of her success. My heart was filled with pride when I heard influential people praise her creativity, her talent, her perseverance. Larry could only dream of such a party, the thought flashed through my mind as I stood aside, watching what was happening. Just a few years ago, our family name was tainted by selfishness and greed, but now, thanks to Linda, we have won respect and admiration at the highest levels of art. Our name was now associated with honesty, hard work, and uncompromising talent. Late in the evening, when the guests had already started to leave, I joined Linda on the balcony of her new loft. We stood side by side, admiring the lights of the night city twinkling in the distance. Linda suddenly squeezed my hand, her gaze full of gratitude. None of this would have been possible without you, Mom, she said softly, and I felt a warmth spreading through my heart. You've always believed in me when no one else has. You fought for me. I will always owe you. I hugged her, holding onto a glass of champagne. A feeling of happiness, real, without impurities, was beating in my chest. Nonsense, my brave girl, I said with a smile. Your success is all thanks to your talent and vision. I was just helping you with the business side so you could focus on what you love. Linda smiled back, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous twinkle. Well, I guess I inherited your business sense and Dad's creative approach, she joked, raising her glass. For us. For overcoming all difficulties and staying strong together. We clinked glasses, and I laughed happily. Over the years, Linda and I have been through betrayal and greed, through pain and disappointment, but now we stood here, strong, independent, and successful. This legacy that Linda and I have created has become a shining example for others, especially for those who were once part of our past. Larry, who was once the center of our worries and problems, was now just a distant shadow, his life the result of his own decisions and missed opportunities. His envy and feelings of dissatisfaction haunted him, as I heard, for the next few years, while Linda's career grew higher and higher, like a majestic tree whose roots were firmly rooted in the ground, and the crown stretched to the sky. From rumors and occasional mentions in the gossip columns, I learned that Larry was trying to stay afloat, but many years of extravagant life without proper calculations sooner or later led him to collapse. His fascination with expensive habits and reckless decisions resulted in mounting debts that he could no longer repay. At first, he still tried to maintain the illusion of former success, but the creditors were not so patient, and soon he was thrown out of his usual luxurious life. One of his last jobs, as I heard, was a car dealership, but he was fired from there for late payments on loans. This news did not cause me any regret or joy, only a quiet satisfaction that karma, as always, operates according to its unchangeable rules. I was sure that Linda and I would never cross paths with Larry again. His world and ours became parallel, and I saw no point in looking back. At that time, I had already left the corporate sphere, leaving behind years of stress and obligations. My heart went out to what really mattered, my hobbies, my art, and caring for those who needed support. I started helping underprivileged youth, participating in art projects and planning trips around the world, the very dreams that I had been putting off for many years. With each step, I felt an inner renewal and peace that had been unavailable to me for so long. The time has come for changes in my living space. I decided to move to a more cozy, peaceful place, and, fortunately, I found the perfect house in a picturesque coastal village for the elderly. Surrounded by mighty trees and bright blooming gardens, this house became a real refuge where I could enjoy the quiet and measured life. Every morning I walked among nature, met with close friends, talking about life, and all this filled me with a sense of gratitude for what I now have. Meanwhile, Linda has found her soulmate, Riley, a talented software developer. He was a man who admired her energy and boundless creativity. From the very first minutes of communication with him, I saw in Riley not just a partner, but a real colleague for Linda. And my feelings did not deceive me. Soon they decided to move in together, and one day Linda excitedly showed me a unique ring that Riley himself had designed for her to propose. "My dear girl," I said, feeling tears of joy welling up in my eyes. "I'm so happy for you. You have found someone who is truly worthy of your huge heart." Linda told me with a smile about her dream, to arrange a small, cozy wedding in the garden, surrounded only by the closest people. This vision was remarkably similar to what her father and I once had when we were planning our wedding. No extravagance, just sincere commitment to each other and true love. "We'll do without pomp," she said, smiling dreamily. "We just want to be surrounded by those who are really dear to us." I squeezed her hand, touched, seeing her dreams come true. It seemed that everything that her father and I had once dreamed of was now coming to life through her. However, during our conversations about the upcoming wedding, Linda nevertheless cautiously raised one difficult question that I knew would arise sooner or later. "Mom, what do you think? Should I invite Larry?" Her voice was low, as if she was afraid to even say his name. I immediately felt indignation boil up inside me at the thought that this person could be a part of such an important day. "No, dear," I replied firmly. "Don't spoil your special day by inviting him." Linda looked a little upset. I could see that her kind heart still felt pity for a man who did not deserve her compassion. "He's still a member of the family," she said softly, looking at me with gentle sadness. "No matter how difficult it is, I can't completely turn my back on him." I patted her hand gently, realizing that compassion is part of her nature, which she inherited from me. "Linda, if it makes it easier for you to show him a little mercy, then invite him," I said calmly. "I can stand his presence once for your happiness." She breathed a sigh of relief and gratefully squeezed my hand.